for coming and welcome. And I know that you have an incredibly busy schedule. Let me say a couple of things about you. Basically, you've had many big jobs, I think, in research and in statistics and data and so on in the UK, but in particular, I know you were chairman of the, or chief executive, I think, of the ESRC after you'd been in Southampton. And then among a number of jobs, you were principal or president or vice chancellor of the University of Aberdeen, whatever we call these now, but I think principal. And then 4 years ago, you became the national statistician. Now, on the RAMP group, which is the Rapid Assistance to Pandemic Modelling that myself and Mark Birkin, who are organising this meeting, are on, we've had a lot of relatively low-level discussion about data in many senses, and we're well aware that ONS in some sense produced the gold standard of data in this country, and we're very interested in the developments in terms of linking different data sets. So without more ado, Ian, welcome again, and please continue with your presentation. Thank you.
Mike, thank you very much. An enormous privilege to be here. And can I just start by saying I've really enjoyed the things that RAMP have done. We have tried to engage in the broadest sense with everyone. And this has been a pandemic in particular, which I think has been informed by data, but where we would all agree that there is more to do. We're thrilled at the moment to be hosting for the government something called the Integrated Data Programme, which is aiming to really turbocharge the linkage of data, not only administrative data, but also data from large surveys and indeed all kinds of sources. And I'd be really, really keen to link and to make sure that we are working with you all. We see this as a national effort, not something that we are just doing, and really getting advice and indeed help would be extremely useful, as would the fact that we are entirely committed to open data for research, and we will do anything we can to enable data. But it is always, it seems to me, rather than just you know, arriving with a very, very large set of data, it's much better to have had a conversation about those that are the highest priority and what people would want most to do. So I urge that conversation to take place, and I should say that in enabling data, we do so with very strict ethical rules, and also making sure that all the work that we do is in and for the public good, and as I said earlier, is completely open and transparent. So I think within those rules, very, very keen to engage completely fully. Next slide, please. What I'm going to try and do today is to talk about some of the things that we have been doing during the pandemic. My view very strongly, and that of my colleagues, is that a National Statistics Institute at a time such as this has to provide timely, accurate information in order to inform government decision making and to inform citizens of exactly what is going on in terms of the trends in the pandemic. And in order to do that, we really, I think, had to step up and start to use both traditional methods at pace, but also some fairly radical methods. And I'm going to try and describe to you in the next 20 minutes or so some of the things that we've done. I'll highlight some of the both radical data sources, but also some of the modelling which has been done. Can I just say very clearly that while I have been involved in an enormous amount of the planning and identification of the challenges, the modelling and the work that I'm describing today has been carried out by some absolutely brilliant people who have really committed in right across the Office for National Statistics and have, I think, really done amazing things. And also, I would say, in a number of cases where I will highlight, we've done this in partnership with some brilliant academics. And I just, I would spend my entire talk if I listed everybody who had contributed to everything that I'm going to talk about today. So I just say that the whole team across the Office for National Statistics, working as one National Statistics Institute, I think done an enormous amount of good. Let me start by talking, next slide please, about one of the big questions about this time last year, and indeed a little earlier last year, was can you actually make international comparisons of the impact on the pandemic? And I'll start by saying it's very difficult. Different countries have slightly different definitions, particularly around deaths due to COVID-19, and different countries produce data at different times. You'll see in the map, you have the three maps you have in front of you, that Germany has disappeared, and that is because German data take rather longer to appear, and so we cannot use them in what we have here, which is simply some spatial things we did, where we took the average deaths by NUTS region right across the NUTS 3 right across Europe, to the average deaths over the past 5 years, and then compared them with deaths in any particular week. And on the left-hand side, what you see in blue, right, almost right across Europe, is that it had been a fairly good flu season, and therefore very relatively small mortality. But you can just see in northern Italy the beginnings there on the 6th of March of an outbreak as excess mortality gets higher. By the 3rd of April, you see the darker the color, the darker the red, the higher the excess mortality. By the 3rd of April, you'll see right through Spain, high excess mortality. Again, northern Italy and into eastern France and into Paris. At that stage in the UK, we were just receiving a seeding that came right across the UK. I think that is important, as I shall say in a minute, but it is important because when we talk about international comparisons, we think about international outbreaks. If you look there at France and Italy, you'll see that they were not national outbreaks, but regional outbreaks, albeit extremely sadly, they were very, very big ones. And then by April, you can see that the UK was very high. And by this time, Italy and France have started to ease off. Next slide, please. And again, as we come into the second wave, here you'll see that the UK in October and November, relatively low, but it is Eastern Europe that was really experiencing real challenges. UK come in, and if we then move into January, you can see something I'll return to in a moment on the right-hand side, and that is the UK with that variant that developed in Kent, relatively high around the eastern edge of London. Next slide, please. If I bring this together, then if you were to make and I really don't like league tables, particularly on subjects like this, but you'd have to say that by the end of that first wave, the UK and England in particular had the highest rates across Europe, controlling for age, and largely that was because, as I pointed out, it was a national epidemic, but also because we had a much longer tail than just about anywhere else. If you move it through to the 18th of December, the middle slide, the middle line there, then what you see is that a number of the countries in Eastern Europe, together with Spain and Belgium, had higher mortality rates. The point I'm making is that you need to have both temporal estimates and you need very careful pushing together of the data. And then the right-hand side says, well, okay, yes, but at ages under 65. Someone's asked the question, why aren't the German data available? Germany still has a federal system, and so the federal, each as I understand it, each of the regions collects the data, and it takes them rather longer to bring them all together. I'm hoping to be able to fill that in Germany in during this year sometime. Just to say that we still have relatively high levels for people aged under 65. It is worth saying that there is relatively low mortality from COVID to people aged under 65, and so the impact is rather less. Next slide, please. We also are able to make estimates for each of the regions of England, and indeed we make estimates for Scotland, Wales, and for Northern Ireland. This comes from a very large survey we do, 150,000 swabs every 2 weeks, and we publish it every Friday. So you can imagine, if you like, the logistics of the swabs. 150,000 is a representative household sample of England, which allows us to make estimates at a regional level, and indeed representative household samples of Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And you can imagine the logistics of swab to laboratory, back to us, then the analysis taking place, the analysis done very closely with Sarah Walker at the University of Oxford and Thomas House at the University of Manchester, who have really been heroes of this. And you can see that we're then able to make estimates. This is going up to just a few, couple of, well, last week. And what you see is that the rates are pretty low, but there's just a bit of an uptick in Yorkshire and Humberside, and also a little bit in the northeast. I mean, just as a comparison, you're looking at all those, they're at about 0.2%. Some of the numbers in London, for example, around the 2nd of January, when we went into lockdown, were well over 2%. So we are talking about a much lower level. Next slide, please. And indeed, if we look over time from through the last few months, you can see the 14th of November across the UK. And what we do to get these kind of relatively low levels at sub-region, what we do is a multi-level model, and then post-stratify into the to get the sub-regional estimates. You can see it gets, well, I think the first point to say is in November, still our higher rates were in that band, almost, it doesn't look so much like a crescent now, but it goes from the northwest across into Yorkshire and Humberside, and then typically drops down to East Midlands, although there was some in the West Midlands. You can see by the 2nd of January, we had a real challenge right across the heart of England. By the 12th of February, it had dropped some much, and again by March, very, very much lower. These kind of analyses, which we're producing, as I say, on a weekly basis, really are able to, well, are informing government an enormous amount. Next slide, please. But it is not only, next slide, please, again, it is not only about the virus itself, but we've also been very involved in developing fast ways of understanding mobility and fast ways of understanding the impact on the economy. Just a couple of slides here. We work with the Department for Transport, and so we've got around about 250 representative samples of the country, traffic cameras, and then we daily power up the computers with the cameras and get estimates of traffic and so the green at the top is all relative to 100. So the relative to 100 would be prior to the first lockdown, so March 2020, and you can see that the drop down of everything at the beginning of the first lockdown in 2020. Green is heavy goods vehicles, and they came up first, but light commercial vehicles and cars stayed relatively low. Light commercial vehicles have stayed relatively high. That's the lighter of the blues. Cars over time they kind of pick up, and then you get another lockdown and they come down. And as of basically last week, cars are at broadly 80 or 95% of where they were, and then you can pick out bank holidays and quite easily that's the big drops down. We also particularly around the impact towards the end of the transition period, very interested in shipping, so we use GPS data from Earthwatch together with our own data cameras around 13 ports, the 13 biggest ports around the United Kingdom, and that you can see over time the way that shipping movements have happened, and you can, for example, pick out the impact. It was a bit slower just around the new year with the impacts of the end of the transition period, but also some of the challenges around the Kent variant. So we can pick those things out, and we provide those on a very regular basis. Next slide, please. We also have been using financial transaction data. I'll show some more financial transaction data in a moment, but the left-hand slide of this is some data which takes us again right through 2020 through to last week, and looks at bank transfers between banks and on what the spending was, and the kind of lime green at the top are food sort of staples, and you can see that they stay at the index of around about 100 right through, with a bit of an increase just ahead of Christmas, and then you see what we call delayable. So delayable stuff dropped right down and then picked up, and it's often we've seen a real move from in-shop to online, but the two that stay very lower are social, which you can see right at the bottom. The purple and the red is work-related expenditure, so people aren't commuting because a significant proportion of the workforce is working from home. Right-hand side is something we're doing where we web scrape online job advertisements in different areas, and these again take us through recent periods, and you get a sense for the increase in transport and logistics and warehouses, but lower elsewhere. Next slide, please. I look more closely at some of the financial transaction data. These are data that we get from, with 95% of financial transactions broadly that come in from a range of providers, and what this slide largely shows, the total is the big black one in the middle, is that as we have had more lockdowns, financial transactions data shows that people spend during lockdowns. It's just that they spend on different things, and less so, for example, as you'd expect, on entertainment during lockdowns and on fuel and transport. But I think we're now moving forward. These data I'm showing you here are from the transaction provider Revolut, which we work with very closely. Next slide, please. Really important issue if you're having a lockdown is to understand mobility, and we've done that in a number of ways. We've used for example, web scrapes of Google Place. We have used mobile telephone data, but here's some data that we use on Facebook, and it shows journeys between local authorities, and you can easily pick out restrictions. So if you can pick out the restrictions between the 1st of November and the 2nd of December with a drop down in movement, and you can pick up bank holidays, and then you get the mobility coming up. And it's quite important for government to understand the impact of the restrictions over the period of time. Next slide, please. And again, just similar sort of stuff. And what you see here going through this is the period from basically 2021, and the point I just wanted to make is that you see that as you come in towards bank holidays, you get a drop. School closing, you get a drop, but then second half of the half term, as the restrictions eased, step 2 came in. Then everybody rushed out to go and meet people. So the end of the restrictions has exactly the impact you would expect, and that's why those people who work so hard to do mathematical modelling build the end of restrictions into that and use data such as these from us in building in those models. Next slide, please. And then I wanted to finish with some stuff about some of the modelling, Michael, that we've been doing. Next slide, please. First one is just, I think this is quite interesting. One of the big questions right up front was, what was your chance of testing positive if you had been vaccinated? Vaccines, we all know how they work theoretically, but in the field, in practice, how do they work? This is work that Sarah Walker led, and the odds ratio of 1 on the right hand side there is where for people who had not previously tested positive, had not been vaccinated, and this is in the days before the vaccine. So in many ways, this was before, well, not days, but before they had the vaccine. So this was, if you like, the control group. What you see is that in the few days before being vaccinated, people behave. We believe this is due to behaviour. People behave carefully, and they're aware they're going to be vaccinated. Then they stay behaving carefully, because if you have been vaccinated, you will know that you get a stern talking to about how the vaccine doesn't work for 12 days. And then after that, we start to get much more the effect of the vaccine being due to biology, and what Sarah would argue, therefore, and did argue, I think, beautifully in a number of media presentations she did, is that we are seeing a reduction in the chance of becoming positive of 70% for both the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer. Next slide, please. Few words. We also did some work very quickly. We did some work with the University of Oxford. What had been done was Oxford had developed a model to identify those people who were most at risk. And then we were commissioned by the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, to validate this. Does this model work? And what we did was show that at ages broadly under 90, the model, which identified those people most at risk and who therefore required extra support and should be advised to shield, worked pretty well. And so the Department of Health and Social Care put in the model very, very quickly. And this is stuff that we managed to do in about 10 days, working with effectively the whole of the population. And I just think some of the pace at which this has been done, I just take my hat off to my colleagues and those colleagues in academia who've worked with them. Next slide, please. And just a few words on something we've also done. The red line there are the deaths over time in from contracting COVID in the first wave. We also did some work which said, well, okay, how many of these were really excess deaths, and how many were very sadly to those people who very sadly had a pretty strong comorbidity. And so that's that work. And then what we were able to do, next slide please, is then to say, well, okay, we can identify those deaths, and I won't describe what a QALY is, I shall just assume that people are aware, but the dark brown is deaths, the lighter brown is loss of a QALY, and what this analysis shows pretty simply is that because mortality, sadly, for COVID affects those people who are relatively old, then there are lesser, we don't know so much about long COVID at the moment, but there are less, mainly mortality and less to do with quality adjusted life years. As we move across, some of that is due to delays in non-elective care, but the right-hand side was, were we, and this is stuff that I think I would update now, were we to have a long recession, then what you see is long recessions lead to increased mortality and to increased loss of well-being. And so a very long recession would impact on the loss of well-being as opposed to mortality. Next slide, please. And I'm going to finish, Michael, if I may, with just a couple of words on some things we did, which does include linking death registration in this country does not include at the moment ethnicity. So what we did was link death certificates to census data to get ethnicity. And then if I just take you very quickly through each of the different colored histograms, the purple at the top, and let's just take the top left hand, which is Bangladeshi heritage men, then relative to white men, the age specific risk is much higher. Then you model population density and region, and that reduces the, if you like, overall effect of simply being a Bangladeshi heritage. Then we bring in socio-demographic factors, which, as you might expect, people from minority ethnic groups tend to live in less good surroundings. So we bring that in, and that reduces the overall risk. And then we bring in comorbidities. And what you find is that in the first wave, particularly for men and indeed women from Black African backgrounds, the risk remained incredibly high. And we've reported this in a number of places. Next slide shows it for the second wave. And the second wave is much more for people from Bangladeshi heritage or Pakistani heritage, which may reflect region, although we have controlled for region quite carefully, but we are now continuing the work to understand these risks even more. But I think you would all agree, sadly, that they are stark. Next slide, please. And then we also did some work to show that if you had previously been in hospital for something like diabetes, and then you got COVID, you had a very much higher risk of a subsequent hospital visit, and that again is, I think, somewhat worrying, and we've published that one as well. Next slide, please. And that brings me to questions. I hope that was interesting.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you very much, Ian. I'm going to read the questions out in the question and answer list. Let me, I know that we've only got 5 more minutes or so, so let me try to pick out the main questions. There's a question here from Ed Manley at Leeds, basically, and he says, were you able to validate the behavioural change around time of vaccination, such as through tracking Facebook mobility or spending location data? In other words, a question about the impact of vaccination on some of the data that you've been.
Yeah, no, really interesting question. And as yet, no, we haven't done that particular linking and that work. I think it is an interesting question, which is worthy of further research, certainly.
Okay, a quick question here from Robert Mackay. Do you have data on effects of the lockdown on mental health?
Yeah,
I guess
really interesting question.
Yeah,
a really interesting question, which we are we have very high on our list of next stages. But what we have done thus far, I mean, I haven't talked, Michael, today about another survey we do, which goes out to the representative sample of the population. It goes out on a Wednesday, it's online. We get responses back by Monday. We stop it at Monday 4 AM, publish it Monday midday. We're in round, well, 60 or so of this now. And we have asked a number of self-report questions there about anxiety over time, about depression, a report. I mean, I repeat their self-report, and certainly they have shown quite high levels of anxiety. We think it is now incredibly important that we move this work further into mental ill health. In our very big survey where we take the swabs that I've talked about, we are increasingly asking questions with colleagues from academia advising us to make sure we do the right questions around mental ill health. And I also think there is the opportunity where it is linked to COVID for us to do some work linking into health data. Thank you.
Sure. 2 more questions, I think, and then we'll have to finish. There's one from Ed Gallier here. Ed runs the fire safety group at the University of Greenwich. And I'll read it out to you. You've suggested that there's no evidence that there's a difference in the likelihood of infection between the AstraZeneca and Pfizer vaccines. But the recent Public Health England data, 22nd of May, suggests that there's a significant difference after a single dose of each when considering the B.1617.2 variant. However, the sample sizes and nature of the populations are quite different for the 2 vaccines in the PHE published data. Do you have better data?
Look, a fabulous question, to which the answer, of course, is that when we're talking about 617.2, we are working with new data. We are only just starting to see 617.2 because of the national representativeness of it. So it is too early for us to say. Our data that I presented to you are from basically December through to broadly March, and I completely take that point. I think the PhD data are extremely interesting, and the only thing I can say is that there is an enormous, I mean, just like an enormous amount of work going on to be able to authoritatively answer the question that you raise.
Okay, the last question from Duncan Robertson, a very open-ended question really that might be difficult to answer in detail really, but he's asking what's the strategy for data statistics, etc., in terms of who owns the sort of data that you've been talking about. Obviously the ONS yourselves own a lot of the data, but there was quite a lot of other data from agencies such as Public Health England, Bank of England, and so on. And I think the question really Duncan is asking, you know, how one can get access to that data as an academic in some sense.
Well, I think that's a really, really good question. We work really super hard with data owners and develop strong relationships over time with data owners to enable access to data. Fundamentally, we can at the end of the day use the Digital Economy Act, but we tend not to, because it's much better to have a good ongoing relationship with data owners. Where we can make our data available. As I said, we're completely keen on open data. We make our data available through our secure research service, and those data are available to any bona fide researcher. Now, not all the data I've shown you today are available through the secure research service. Some of it we are only able to use at the moment to inform issues around the pandemic, and we do so under very strict privacy constraints. On the other hand, we have always believed that if we develop very strong relationships with people that are trusted, that we demonstrate the strength of our trusted research environments, if we are able to make things available, then over time, better accessibility becomes. So I'm really happy to have a conversation with anyone, and my colleagues are always happy to have a conversation with anyone about which data are available. But I mean, we have a whole series of really exciting projects being undertaken around COVID, which go from everything from, you know, some of the things that I've talked about today, right through to the economic scarring that different groups of the population have experienced as a result of COVID, and that's work that Steve Machin's doing at the London School of Economics. So we do try very hard to make data available as much as possible, but clearly we have to work incredibly hard with the data owners in order to bring access, but we are committed to doing that.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, and a lot of food for thought on the part of all of us. And I hope that this might lead to relationships between yourself and various people who are in the audience, etc.
Really hope so, Michael. I mean, if people love great questions, if I may. But you know, if colleagues have got any specific questions, please don't be backwards in coming forwards, because we do not aim to sit, you know, quietly coming out, you know, once every 58 years or something to say, you know, we very much see ourselves in a partnership with colleagues in the academic sector to get more work done, which at the end of the day is aiming to improve the lives of everybody in our population.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.